Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not a professional speaker, but I'm kind of passionate about what I'm talking about. You know, my dad, what it meant to my dad, and he understood what it meant to you guys. And one thing just came to me right now when Dawn was talking about that they christened number 4 engine, kind of jumping into the middle of the speech just because, you know, he said that. One of the missions, Dad had almost all the fuel cells in the plane shot out. They were trying to get back to England, and they had one engine running. They ran at full throttle, full manifold pressure, and when they got close to the English Canal, my dad told everybody to get their parachutes on and bail out. They weren't sure they were going to be able to get across the English Canal. February, the canal was 21 degrees. Your life expectancy is 3 to 5 minutes at best. Everybody gets their parachutes on. They walk up. They hand the parachute to my dad. My dad said, "I'm taking it across." He didn't want their plane to go in the drink. He was willing to basically die, try to make sure that plane got home, because he appreciated how much people paid for that plane. Not the government bought that plane, the workers at Hanford Energy Group. So the navigator looks at him and says, "You're going across, we're all going across." And they made it. They landed with 25 gallons of fuel left, and I never knew that it was the number 4 engine that she had christened. The only engine they had running when they got home was number 4 engine. Oh, wow. That just came to light when he was talking about her christening the number 4 engine. You know, because Dad said it was so hard to fly. If it had been one of the inboard engines, it would have been a whole lot easier, but it was an outboard engine, and he had to run it full. And I can't imagine, I'm not a pilot, but I can't imagine what it'd be like to have one engine out here trying to pull everything to try to, you know, keep the rudders and keep it straight. Those planes were burning 413 gallons an hour, and they landed with 25 gallons left. Anyway, my dad was actually, when he got out of high school, he went to Wichita, Kansas, went to work at Boeing. You know, and it's kind of fitting to be, you know, wound up being in a Boeing plane later, but he worked at Boeing for 3 years and then was drafted into the Army. And he gets into the Army, and they hand him a 1903 Springfield, and real quick my dad realized that this just wasn't what he really wanted to do. And they were losing so many pilots and gunners and everybody to the war effort in the planes that they started opening up to anybody that could pass an aptitude test could switch over to the Army Air Corps. Because before, to get to be a pilot or a co-pilot, you had to have a college degree. And then they kind of reduced that down to where you had to have some college education. And they said, if you can pass an aptitude test, you can be a pilot. You know, so my dad still had to keep doing his infantry training the whole time. He had the right angle flashlights they had in World War II. He was burning up a set of batteries every week, studying all night. He'd pull his army blanket over, and he would study for this aptitude test. And when he took the test, there was 800 and some people, and I don't know the exact numbers, but 800 and some people took that test, and he finished number 3. Put him in the category to be a pilot, and that's when he started going through pilot school. Got out of the infantry and got into pilot school. His first plane he drew over there was a B-24 Liberator with a nose paint shoo-shoo baby. He flew that 12 full missions. A 13th mission, they took off. They just got over the English Canal, and the generator quit. They couldn't make the generator run. So they didn't have the heated muffs. They didn't have anything for the gun sights. Wouldn't have power for the radio. So they had to turn around and go back. They got penalized. That mission didn't count. And so the next 13th mission he drew Hanford's plane, day's pay. And of course, you know, everybody, 13th mission the first time came off not so good. What's the second 13th mission going to be like? And they flew that day, and I virtually no flak, no fighters, very easy mission. By the second mission, Dad had said that plane could almost fly itself. He said it was so easy to fly. The B-24 Liberator, he said, was a cumbersome plane, didn't fly as good. He said the B-17G flew almost like the Spearman he was trained in as a single-engine plane. And so he was just overwhelmed with how good the plane did. One of the things is the German fighters would never attack them from the sides. They would attack the 24s from the side because they had so much more firepower. You know, if you came at the side of a B-17G, you could have the top turret with 250s, the bottom turret, waist gunner. You could have 4 or 5 50 calibers aiming at you at any one time. And so they would not come out of them from the side. They come out of them below and from above. Sometimes they got fighter escorts, sometimes they didn't. The P-51 Mustangs, they really liked it when they got them for a fighter escort, because if the Germans seen that they had 51s with them, they wouldn't come up after them. The bad side is the P-51 pilots realized this, so when they got close to the bomb site, they would hang high and right, way behind the bomb group, and wait for them to send the Messerschmitts up after them, and then the 51s would go after the Messerschmitts. You know, Dad says occasionally you kind of felt like he was a piece of steak, you know, put out there for some bait, you know. But, you know, it's just, one of the notes on there is the ball turret on the bottom could be, you could climb into it and out of it from the plane. But if it got damaged and you couldn't roll the ball over to get your door up to go into the plane, if it became damaged and they were going to land, especially if no running gears or anything, they would turn all the bolts. They could actually unbolt that ball turret and drop it off. And then the ball turret gunner is on his own to get out of it and get his parachute deployed. Dad's ball turret gunner went out there one night with a hammer and ball peened all of his bolts where they weren't going to be able to drop him off. You know, I think that's all well and fine, but you know, if you think about doing a belly landing and you're in the ball turret on the bottom, you aren't going to live. You know, but he wasn't going to be dropped out. But talking about, you know, that mission with the on that fourth engine is so astonishing because of the pride Dad had in that plane and understanding that hardworking people paid for that. You know, he talked about that more than just a little bit, you know, the appreciation he had for that. You know, and just amazing. The flak at times, and of course you're probably all familiar with the flak, what it is. Might not, some of the younger people might not be. It's an altitude bomb. The Germans could dial in what altitude they wanted to go off at, and that shell would go up to that altitude and explode. And it was designed in such a fashion that virtually all the shrapnel blew out. Hardly any went up and hardly any went down. It all went out. One mission, his bombardier got up off his chair, walked up to my dad to borrow a Lucky Strike cigarette from him. If you can imagine this, they're flying, they're on oxygen, and he wanted to smoke. Goes up to get his Lucky Strike cigarette, lights it up, goes back to sit down, and there's a hole blowed through his bombardier's chair from a piece of shrapnel. And that pretty much just about had to be the very nose of that shell, because virtually none of that shrapnel went up and down. Almost all of it went out. And so that was kind of amazing. You know, just to think about that. The waist gunners at times would talk about on a real rough mission, the shrapnel was so thick, and every time one of those shells explode, they'd have a great big black cloud. And one of the waist gunners said at one time, he said he swore he could have jumped out of the plane and walked across the smoke because it was so heavy. You know, and that's just hard to imagine. One mission, Dad was talking about flying along, and the plane was actually pulsating as the shrapnel bombs was going off. And they fly in 3 levels, 4 planes in each group. And Dad, you didn't choose where you flew; they give you your assignment. And Dad's assignment that day was the bottom level. And he's flying along, and this plane is pulsating every time a shrapnel bomb would go off below him. And so he motions to the other planes that he could see to go up 10 feet. They raised 10 feet in elevation, and the plane quit pulsating. You know, how close was the bombs? Yeah. You know, that's just unbelievable. Some of the funny things about it, you know, they're going out there and on radio silence. They're not supposed to speak a word because the Germans would pick them up and know they were coming. And they were getting close to the bomb site. About this time, Dad come across the radio, "Who dat?" And it was silence for about 10 or 15 seconds, and then somebody else come on there and said, "Who say, who dat?" And then about 10 or 15 seconds later, and somebody else will say, who say that? Who say? And Dad said that kept carrying on until it was about 10 words long, and all of a sudden the colonel gets on there and snarled, "Damn it, I said radio silence." And it just quiet. They normally started communicating back and forth when they were going back to the base to see who lost, what men were lost, what planes were lost, because they were a tight-knit group. Just the crew was so tight that my dad stayed in communication with him until he died. And after he died, they even paid for my mom a plane ticket to fly back there for another one of the reunions. They were real tight. But the other crew members, the other crews that they were buddied with, they were also tight. And they always radioed back and forth communicating. And that day with radio silence, they landed without saying a word. The radio would say, "You're clear to land, you're clear to land." They would land, nobody said a word. The one thing that was kind of a funny note is when Dad was in pilot's training, he was down in Tampa, Florida, and at that time he was flying a B-24 Liberators. And he the base general walks up to him and said, "Lieutenant Weininger, find you a co-pilot. We're flying to Omaha, Nebraska tonight." My dad looked at him and said, "Yes, sir." And he didn't ask what for. He said, "Yep, I'm going to go up and have supper with my wife." So his best buddy, who was a pilot also, was Bobby Willis from Watson, Arkansas. And so my dad goes to Bobby Willis and says, "Bob, how would you like to fly to Omaha, Nebraska tonight? Be my co-pilot." And it was kind of a degrading to ask a pilot to be a co-pilot. But Bobby thought, "Heck yeah, I get to fly to Omaha, Nebraska tonight. Let's do it." They get in the plane. They fly out. They fly to Omaha, Nebraska. The general has supper with his wife. They wait at the plane. He comes back out. They get in, fire up, take off. And as they're coming into the Tampa base, they're coming in for the approach, and they look up there, and there's about 20 or 30 MP Jeeps. They land, and all these Jeeps are following them in. And the first thing they do is they march into the plane, and they grab my dad, and they marched him off in one Jeep and off one direction, and grabbed Bobby Willis and took him off in another direction, and took the general off in a third direction. And they get Dad in the room in there, and they said, "What were you doing?" He says, "Flying the general to Omaha, Nebraska." "Why?" My dad looked at him and says, "He's the CO. I did what he told me. I do what I'm told." Bobby Willis is in the other interrogation room, and he tells him the exact same thing. Nothing happened to Dad or Bobby. The base general was never seen from again. I don't know. I'm sure they didn't court-martial him, because you wouldn't do that in wartime, but I would imagine he got moved to a different base, and he may not have had all these stars when it was said and done. But it's kind of comical stuff like that. And but he always talked about how much better of a plane that 17 was than the 24. He said the firepower that the B-17G carried, the machine guns it had, everything was just so much more impressive on that plane than the 24. Wasn't me, didn't do it. But he was so appreciative to get that plane, and I wished my dad would be alive to come out and thank the Hanford people for this, because he's talked about that a lot, that it was just so fantastic to be able to fly a piece of machinery that would almost fly itself. One of the missions, one of the other planes in their group was shot up so bad it had nothing left in the midsection. The navigator was dead, the radio operator was dead, both waist gunners, the bombardier. The only people living was the pilot and the front gunner and the tail gunner. And they're coming back in to England, and of course they let everybody else land, because they say this plane can't stay together, because all that was holding it was just the metal framework from the back to the front, and they landed and it did not come apart. So that was one tough plane. It was just extremely tough. You'd hate to be in that position. Some of the things that my dad got out of this deal was he learned he was not a great student in high school, and by his own testimony he said I was probably kind of a slacker, didn't put forth the total effort and everything. I was just talking to the college up here, and I was telling them this story about Dad's, how he enjoyed education and he learned to get smarter, how he studied to be a pilot. He never quit trying to teach himself something. He learned how to do wiring. He learned how to do plumbing. He could do anything. Overhaul trucks, cars, he could do it all. And I was telling that to the students up there a while ago, and that's why I'm a little bit late here. One of the students came up afterwards, and of course I harped on him pretty hard about stay in school. Get a good education. You cannot substitute a good education. One of those students came up to me after the deal up there and shook my hand. He was going to drop out. And he said, because of hearing the story about what our soldiers went through in World War II, and me harping him on a good education, he's going to stay in school. So that made me feel pretty darn good. But he was, one of the things he always talked about was, his exact quote is, "It's a top flying plane and it's surely paid for itself." And he was talking about Hanford's employees paying for that, because he had so much appreciation knowing that this wasn't just the government grabbing tax money. They said, these people volunteered to pay for this plane. At Christmas time, they would send over your care packages from your family. My dad got care packages from everybody at Hanford, him and his group. And they got a pallet load of stuff. One of the things I brought out that we did not find until my mom is in the rest home with dementia, very strong. And so we finally had to sell the homestead for money to keep her in the hospital and in the rest home. And we're cleaning it out. And that gray elephant meant a lot to me. It's nothing valuable. It's just a homemade built cabinet that's about 8 feet tall. But I helped Dad paint that gray when I was real little. And I always remember Dad talking about it. So I wanted that gray elephant at home. And my wife and I went and got it here a few months ago. And this is what really shocked me. The mice had got in there. Of course, Mom hadn't lived at the farm for about 4 years. The mice had got into that gray elephant and ate everything up in there. Manuals on Dad's Minneapolis Moline tractor. Service manuals on the Ford pickups, and all his paperwork he had in there. Paper filters. The mice had ate everything in there except one canvas bag. They had not touched that canvas bag. 3 letters, 4 letters from Hanford Energy Group people, and 5 or 6 Christmas cards, and a whole bunch of actual film footage from World War II were in that bag. Did God tell the mice, stay the hell out of this? You don't know. And but one of the things I want to emphasize the most to you people, I am so deeply grateful for what my wife has done in trying to find my dad's World War II bomber jacket that my mom had donated to the Richland High School, and it's been stolen out of there and has never shown up again. She ran an ad on social media begging anybody that might have this jacket, we'd pay for it to have it back. The family had it back. Especially to Donald, because Donald is the one that started communicating back, what do you know about this jacket? And if that conversation wouldn't have happened, I wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be donating all the stuff to the national park for everybody to enjoy. There's some pieces we give. I've still got a few more pieces that they will be out here sometime, maybe sooner than later. My dad procured a few things out of the plane, and he was ashamed by it later. But the altimeter, the 8-day wind-up clock, and I don't know where it's disappeared. I cannot find his face mask. He had his oxygen mask. His earphones, he had them, and I brought them out. But the altimeter, we took my mother-in-law to the mountains 2 years ago for her 75th birthday, and I wrapped that altimeter in foam so it wouldn't damage it, and we took that to the Colorado Rockies. And if you had the barometric pressure, an altimeter built in 1942 still kept perfect spot-on altitude all through the mountains. That's pretty good testimony. That plane flew 80 or 90 missions, I'm not sure exactly. Dad flew at 24, but for something that delicate, after that many missions of planes being shook up, being shot up, my dad had actually had a piece of the shrapnel that was in one of the fuel cells from the time they had 3 engines out and running on the 4th one. Somebody got into the footlocker and it is no longer there. That would have been a real piece of neat history to have out here, but we don't have that. But you know, all of his life he was so proud of what he accomplished, you know, about working with the plane and stuff. My dad was never one that bragged. He would not, you know, try to gain credit for anything. He was always pretty meek and mild. One time he came to me and he apologized to me for showing off. You know, and I'm in my early 30s, and I said, showing off? He was 65 years old. He'd been battling cancer for 15 years. He'd driven an activity bus for the track team. And a couple of the athletes were dogging him. You know, hey, old man, don't you wish you could do this? And they started doing some push-ups. And one kid put his feet up on the bottom shelf of the school bus and started doing push-ups. And he kept telling my dad, hey, old man, don't you wish you can do this? And my dad finally said, I'm sorry, son, but I just got tired of them bugging me. And Dad says, well, I think I can. And at 65, battling cancer for 15 years and trying to stay in great health, he got off the bus, did a handstand up against the bus, and did 3 vertical push-ups. The high school kid tried that. Butted his nose, skinned the side of his face up, and they left Dad alone. But Dad was ashamed of himself for showing off. You know, that's just, you know, what he was. You know, that's how he lived his life. He always harped on us kids to be all you can be and be better than that, and I just wished I'd have paid more attention, but anyway. But right towards the end, when he was about to pass on, the cancer pretty much had him good. He started trying to find that plane. And my sister went with him a time or two down to the Phoenix scrapyard, and he would spend a week at a time going through that scrapyard, through plane by plane by plane, trying to find pieces of day's pay. And he died not knowing what happened to it. And I didn't know what happened to it till we got the book, the story on day's pay, written by a guy over here in Montana, and I can't think of his name right now, but in there it shows day's pay getting scrapped in 1947 down in that scrapyard in Phoenix. Oh yeah, on my dad's tombstone, Dad was so proud of day's pay and everything it meant to him that you know, he told my mom that when he passed on, he'd like, if they could do it, he'd like to have day's pay put on his headstone. And my wife's got a picture of it in her phone of his headstone, and it is so precise. And this was back down in '87. Now they're putting people's faces and pictures on headstones, but back in '87 they etched into his headstone day's pay, and it's perfectly atomically correct, and you can even read the day's pay emblem on it. And the mural down here has Dottie over day's pay, and none of the photos we can find, I don't know what that was. You know, if you've seen that mural down there, you'll see Dottie on there. I don't know what that is, but that's not on any of the pictures we have of the planes. So you get to talking to some of those vets, and they start telling their stories, and it's just amazing. My hat's off to any vets that are in here. How many vets have we got in here? My hat's off to you, gentlemen. You know, because, you know, just about no matter what you did, you give up stuff. Thank you. Oh.
You're watching CityView TV, your Richland community connection.
Well, hello and welcome to the latest edition of Explore Richland. I'm your host, Mark Ingham. Well, today we are happy to be exploring at the historic Richland Parkway. This shopping mecca is comprised of an eclectic mix of local businesses, from amazing places to eat to shops and businesses where you can find just about anything. The Richland Parkway has it all. Now, today we are excited to check out the newest tenant here at the Richland Parkway, Fuse. Let's go take a look. Wow, well, it is absolutely beautiful in here. In fact, it even has that new office smell to it. Well, we are happy to welcome Jess Stanglin to the program. Jess is the community manager here at Fuse. Jess, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Thanks for being here.
You bet. Well, you all made the exciting decision recently to move Fuse from basically across the street, you were near Howard Heyman Park before, to the Richland Parkway. Now, before we talk about the move and its benefits, we want to make sure people understand the amazing objective behind Fuse.
Sure. So Fuse is a business and community accelerator. As a business accelerator, we focus on entrepreneurs and startups in the community. As a community accelerator, last year we hosted and sponsored over 120 events covering all kinds of technology, creative, community development topics. And then we are also this space. This is a co-working space. It's a hub for small businesses, for startups, students, and just really a great hub for the community to come together and learn.
Wow, that's amazing, and thanks for that.
Yeah.
Now, we did mention that you did recently move across the street, here to the Richland Parkway. So how excited are you to put down new roots here in the Parkway, and what will this new space offer Fuse?
Yeah, we love the Parkway. We feel that the Parkway really embodies a lot of similar characteristics to Fuse, that it's a dynamic community. There's a lot of unique businesses, and there's just so many different kinds of members and people that work together in collaboration. So we hope with this space to really have it be kind of this launch pad for the next phases, not just for Fuse and the entrepreneurial ecosystem, but really for some positive development in the Tri-Cities.
Wow, and let's just talk about the space in general. I mean, it's obviously a lot bigger than your previous space, so maybe talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. So our last space, we are about 5,000 square feet. This building's over 10,000.
Wow.
The building is purchased by some local investors, investment groups, and Fuse has a long-term lease with it. So we got the building in November. We went through 2 months of renovation. We got the keys at the beginning of January, and then throughout January we kind of finished the build out of everything, getting our beautiful furniture from Steelcase, building out our kitchen. We have like a shower room, getting the Wi-Fi installed and the speakers and kind of all the high-tech stuff. So we've invested a lot into this building and this space, knowing that for the next 10 years we can grow into it. It can be flexible. And it's not just a space for Fuse and for the co-working, but we really built it all with an intention that it would be available for the community to use as well. So it is a space that anyone can rent, reserve. We can hold 140 people, which is a really good number. There's kind of just not that space in Tri-Cities right now to host that amount of people. So it's great for like fundraisers, events, that kind of stuff. So we have our main space, we have 2 conference rooms, we have a podcast studio and a photo studio. Well,
Jess, I'm going to sound like a broken record because I just keep saying how beautiful this new space is. And I'm curious now, how can people become involved with Fuse?
Sure, yeah. So if you're an individual, we have memberships. Fuse is a membership-based co-working space. So we have memberships for 24/7 co-working, and all that information, too, is on our website, fusespc.com. Also for individuals, there's the option to get involved in this community. So you could get involved in a few other ways if it's not necessarily membership. I'm always looking for people that want to host or help organize events, either for Fuse or around the community, and love to just talk about how that might happen. And also for more professional services, we have a mentorship program where this is a service that we're providing for our entrepreneurs and our startups that are just getting started and they have a lot of questions. They don't know, where to always go for the advice and guidance. So that's something that we are developing and have had some great success already with is the mentorship program.
Wow.
Yeah, so if you're a business or company, there's also ways to get involved. We have our business partnerships that help support all of our programming, and also there's some social media consultation with that. So just kind of helping build that marketing, that collaboration, and really showcasing the partnership. And then businesses can also get involved in the mentorship, like I was talking about earlier. So.
Okay, wow, that's great. It's very exciting. Yeah. Well, and the creative minds here at Fuse have created an inspiring question and answer series called the Fireside Chat. Can you enlighten us about that?
Yeah, so Fireside Chat was actually started by two of our members. They had seen it on stage in Austin, and they wanted to bring it back to Fuse. So our Community Development Committee puts that on, and it's just a really cool event that happens quarterly.
Okay.
And it's kind of like getting to eavesdrop on a conversation between two people, and we always select a speaker that is some kind of mover shaker, but maybe not so much in the media, or people don't always know about it. So we like to bring that out in them.
And I'm sure people can go to Fuse's website to find out the dates and times of upcoming Fireside Chats.
Yep.
You bet. Okay, well, Fuse was established in Richland back in 2014, and now I'm really excited to talk about success stories that you've had come into your walls here. How many businesses and startups have, Fuse been a catalyst for?
Yeah, so we have launched over 84 companies out of Fuse, and that was from 2016 statistics. So I know for sure it has gone up since then. And yeah, there's been some pretty well-known names that we've promoted a lot, some big hitters like Gravis Law, Wildland, I3 Global, Solar Spirits, all those companies started at Fuse. And what's been really cool to see is, and just in my time of being here, is that a lot more women have been stepping into the roles of CEOs and co-founders. So we've had some great success stories like Humming Hemp, which is run by entrepreneur Hillary Kelsey and her partner Max Schneider. And their products can be found, they sell all natural hemp-based products, and they can be found in Albertsons and Safeways all up and down the West Coast. We've got Thrive Fitness, which is a outdoor adventure business started by Sarah Lingley.
Wow, that's great. That's exciting. And I want to ask you maybe why that is. Do you have a reason maybe of why that is?
I think that the more women that are willing to step into those roles and get involved, the more inspiring it is to have their friends, their families, their former colleagues want to do it too. There's kind of this sense that, well, if she could do it, I could do it too. And so it's really just been an empowering thing to see and witness and really help be a part of and cultivate.
That's amazing. And it is an exciting time in Fuse's history. New building, new classes, new furniture. I mean, a lot of news. What do you want to offer the people of the Tri-Cities with this new space?
Yeah, I think, the Tri-Cities, I was born and raised here, and I've seen it grow and change so much in the time that I've lived here. And I just see so much more potential that could be there. Having lived elsewhere in big cities and experienced what some of those things are, I'm excited to be a part of it at Fuse, of really cultivating and manifesting that in our community. And so really that's what Fuse is about. It's about people coming together that want to start something new, whether it's a new business or it's a community event. So to really just grow upon that, to grow businesses, to grow entrepreneurs, to be educating them so that they're successful and they're sustainable and they're long lasting. And I think really ultimately long-term goals are to bring in some of those high-tech jobs. We're really well positioned, being so close to Seattle, being close to Portland. We've got the labs, we have the highest per capita PhDs, and we should be the next Silicon Desert. So that's something that we're really focusing on and driving in kind of a long-term idea. So yeah.
Wow, well said, and that's a very motivating way to end this program. And we're definitely looking forward to seeing how Fuse, grows with the city of Richland in the coming years. So I'd like to thank Jess Stanglin for coming on the program and talking to us. Jess is the community manager here at Fuse. And of course, if you would like more information on Fuse, you can visit them online. Their webpage is www.fusespc.com. And don't forget, if you'd like more information on the City of Richland, you can visit us on our webpage, www.ci.richland.wa.us. And of course, if you're a social media type person, you can find us on all the popular social media platforms. Log on and give us a like on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're always sharing tons of important information on those social media platforms. Well, I'm Mark Ingham, and thanks for joining me on this edition of Explore Richland. Now, before I leave, I'm going to have Jess take me downstairs to the photography studio, because that's a place I can see myself. Oh, I want to go photography.
Oh, okay.
Because that's a place I can see myself spending a lot of time. So let's go check it out.
All right.
nice to meet you.
I'm Cindy.
Cindy, nice to meet you.
Tom.
And Tom, welcome. We're so happy to have you all here with us this morning, and we'll go ahead and come on board. Welcome.
The American Empress invited a number of city staff members from the city of Richland and city council members as well to board the boat for about an hour and a half long tour to see what comes into town here as far as the tourism that it brings to the area.
The American Empress is a 7-day cruising vessel, and we go up and down the Columbia and Snake Rivers. We'll start in Vancouver, Washington, one direction, and end in Clarkston, Washington. We have about 200 guests on board every week, and about an 80 to 85 person crew on board. And so almost 300 people every week on board the American Empress.
These are people that would not otherwise come to Richland, more than likely, except this is one of the stops for this boat. They go up and down the Columbia River and the Snake River as well, and this is one of their stops, and they're here for a good number of hours. Many times they're here overnight. They leave the boat, they enter our downtown area, they tour through the area, and it's a great economic development activity for Richland and the Tri-Cities.
Richland is beautiful. We're so happy to be here, and the dock, the waterfront is just fantastic. Richland is a very special place. We like to highlight the B Reactor tour. We have a special tour that goes to the B Reactor for our guests. We also take them on our Hop On, Hop Off program to the Reach Museum, as well as Sacagawea State Park and downtown Richland as well. And we like to highlight the wine and spirits on Red Mountain, and we have a tour that goes there, as well as the Black Heron Distillery. And so Richland is a very special location for us, and we always are happy to be here. It's one of the most beautiful docks that we visit every week. And we like to also visit the farmers market that happens on the weekends, Friday mornings. We're able to bring our guests to the farmers market, and they love that experience. And just seeing the activity and the life right around the river is fantastic. It's always busy and energized, and a beautiful place to be. From a guest perspective, our guests love it. It is so welcoming and so warm and beautiful. I mean, you all keep it so beautiful. We also have bicycles on board for our guests to use at no cost. And this is my favorite port to go bicycling, because you can go in either direction for miles.
The dock was primarily built for boats such as this, and so the city has made a commitment to continue to update and upgrade this facility here so that we can continue to attract these large boats to our Richland dock.
And just our vessel alone, almost 300 people, 280, 285 people come here every week. And would love to have those businesses close by. I know that we've taken advantage of the jet skis, so anyone who has kayaks or jet skis, we love it when they all line up and we can just say, hey, I'd love to take a kayak out for an hour, or one of those boards, those standing boards. So, but please do encourage them, and let them know that they have a hungry audience of consumers here.
Beginning in March, residents will see some minor changes to their City of Richland utility bills. The bills will now be produced in color, which will assist with readability and in identifying important messages. The format of late notices will be upgraded to a full page on white paper with red ink. If you have questions regarding your utility bill, email customer service, call 942-1104, or visit the City of Richland's website at /myutility.
and welcome to City Corner, an ongoing program where we talk with City Council and staff about what's happening in our city. I'm Michael Charbonneau. Well, when you think of services in the city, you think of public works, energy services, and police and fire. But another important service in the city is the proper development of our city. And that is accomplished through the Department of Development Services. Joining us today to talk about this is Development Services Director Curran Jensen. Welcome, Curran.
Thanks, Mike. Good to be here.
Good. Well, so now you oversee 4 divisions in your department. That is building, planning, housing, and economic development. So let's talk about each of those, and we'll start right off with building. Building is basically ensuring that every building in the city fits certain codes and certain standards. Tell me about that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, the main function of the building department is to make sure that our homes, our businesses, other places we frequent in the community, churches, schools, things of that nature are all safe. That is their primary purpose. In fact, there's at least a dozen, up to 15 different types of building inspections that are done for a typical single-family home, for example. And again, the primary purpose is to make sure the safety of that home for the residents of that home will be assured. They're not looking necessarily at the quality of work, but making sure the safety of the work is done throughout the whole construction process.
And where do these standards come from?
They come from the International Building Codes, which is a set of adopted codes that's adopted at the state level and then also adopted by local level. And so every few years, these international building and safety codes are reviewed by a code council to look at updates that are required and that sort of thing. And so a big important part. For example, this year we've had a lot of snow. People have worried about the integrity of their roofs. And that's part of the building code, is they have certain snow loads depending on which part of the country you're in, certain wind loads, things of that nature, so that they can sustain the types of weather for different areas of the country.
So that brings it to the question of, do we have certain specifics here for our area that are different than other areas? Or?
Ours is a fairly routine area here. We don't, we do have higher winds, but certainly not like what you're subject to in hurricane areas. For example, down in Florida and along the Gulf Coast, you're going to have what's known as hurricane clips and that sort of thing on your roofs and things like that. But no, there's nothing out of the ordinary here. The high winds that we sustain are typical of many areas across the country, and so we don't get a lot of snow here. We're not subject to great frequency of earthquakes or things like that, and so typically the standard building codes are what are required here.
So we have staff members that basically work with the builders, and they go out and conduct these inspections during the whole process.
Yeah, so we have 4 building inspectors when we're at full staff, and again, with a typical single-family house, up to 15 different types of inspections, a dozen or more for commercial properties as well. So they're looking at things like the plumbing, to make sure the plumbing's done appropriately, drywall or the sheetrock, the framing, insulation inspection. I mean, that's important to make sure the proper amount of insulation is put in each of these homes. And then before any occupancy takes place, a builder or developer should have a final occupancy permit and final inspection done before occupancy is allowed from the general public.
Very good. The next division is planning, which basically sets the guidelines, I guess, for the building who do the inspectors. Tell me about planning and the importance of long-term planning.
Yeah, so planning and development division, it's very, to answer your question specifically, it's very important. The state of Washington is one of the fastest growing states in the country, and the Tri-Cities area is one of the fastest growing areas in the state of Washington. So we're moving right along here, and so it's important that we have the infrastructure in place to support all this population growth that is taking place. I mean, we're looking to make sure we have proper infrastructure as far as water and sewer goes, as far as parks go, and other amenities throughout the community. And it all starts with the planning division. When somebody wants to annex property into the city, we begin with the subdivision process, the zoning process, and and then that evolves into the building permits and things like that. But there's always standards that require certain acreage of parks, for example, for per population and that sort of thing, and we want to make sure we continue to invest in our community and have the infrastructure in place to make our city a very comfortable city and a city that everybody can enjoy living in.
And so basically, as part of the planning, we're making sure that building just doesn't haphazardly happen all over the place, which is the zoning aspect of it. How do we determine, what goes where as far as zoning goes?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways there. The primary way is comprehensive plan, which I like to describe as a should document. And as what I mean by that is a comprehensive plan. Once adopted, we should have commercial in these areas here. We should have residential in these areas here. And it's with the zoning that is incorporated after a comprehensive plan is adopted. That becomes what I call a shall document. Mm-hmm. That is then when the requirements are in place that this area shall be zoned and developed for residential purposes, and another area shall be zoned and developed for commercial purposes. And it's always important to not have certain uses, kind of like a library, for example. Mm-hmm. There's certain areas in a library where it's a quiet zone, and right. You shouldn't be boisterous and loud, and that's the same with zoning. There's certain areas where we shouldn't have industrial land right adjacent to residential uses, or even some commercial uses shouldn't be immediately adjacent to residential uses. And so that's done through the comprehensive plan process and then followed up by the zoning process. And all of this is done, especially at the comprehensive plan level, is done with public meetings, public hearings, and input from the entire community. And we actually went through our 10-year comprehensive plan review about a year and a half ago, and have a new one that was adopted by the council about a year and a half ago.
And so for citizens' knowledge, then the planning of their city is with their input. Planning Commission is a volunteer committee. So I guess that's just what I'm trying to ask is, who determines what zone is what? So it basically boils down to the citizens and the input of everything. This is what we want our city to look like, and this is what it's going to be.
Yeah, it all starts with the citizens and input from the citizens, and then it goes on through the Planning Commission and then on to the City Council for final adoption of not only the comprehensive plan, but also any zone changes that take place in our development codes.
So recently, I guess it's been a few years now, but the city changed over to a hearing examiner process for, I guess, zone changes and other what you call quasi-judicial things. Explain to me what the hearing examiner works and how that's been working for the city.
Yeah, so there's kind of three different areas, primary areas, that the hearing examiner works with. And the hearing examiner, rather than many communities having an advisory board review this is one individual that is not an employee of the city. Typically is someone who is an expert in land use law, perhaps is an attorney, and we have one hearing examiner that comes to our community once a month. And the three different areas that they primarily are involved with would be zone changes, subdivisions, and special use permits. And a zone change, for example, is where somebody wants to change their property from single-family zoning to maybe multifamily and allow them to put apartments in a neighborhood versus single-family homes. Subdivision is obvious. That would be subdividing the land for future houses. And then a special use permit would be something that may or may not be allowed in an area depending on the location of town, but might be best allowed if there's certain conditions like hours of operation or where a driveway or drive-through service should be located. Those are certain conditions that may be imposed on certain types of uses. So those are kind of the three areas, primary areas that the hearing examiner works with. And we have an excellent hearing examiner at the present time. He conducts public hearings in a very fair fashion. He allows citizen input, ample citizen input, and he's very fair, he's very courteous, and just does an outstanding job, while all at the same time making sure that we're complying with the standards that are in our zoning code.
You know, and we televise the hearing examiner meetings here on CityView, and that's one thing I've noticed about that. It may not be the most visually stunning meeting to watch, but the whole temper of the meeting is such that it's a very, very fair process. So what is the advantage of this hearing examiner as far as, you know, as far as when the final decisions are made?
Yeah, the big advantage is because this individual comes with a land use law background, they know exactly, and in our case, the gentleman that takes care of that for us, he knows exactly what laws need to be implemented and what decisions can be made without creating a bias or a decision that cannot be supported or backed up by law. And as a result, we've not been legally challenged on any of his decisions, to my knowledge, since we've implemented that program.
So it basically protects the city from...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And in many cases, on some of the items he reviews, he's advisory to the city council, and then in certain instances, he is the final authority on those decisions that are made.
Good. So another division that you oversee is something that a lot of citizens may not be aware of as far as programs that we offer, but it's the housing division. And explain a little bit more to me about what the housing division does and some of the programs we offer.
Yeah, so there's kind of two different components to the housing division. The Community Development Block Grant Program, or many times it's referred to as the acronym CDBG. And that's when we're able to bring in federal funds from the Department of Housing and implement programs in our low to moderate income neighborhoods. And that can be typically the areas you see are for park improvements, improvements in our parks, or it could also be for accessibility standards, for example, sidewalks or accessible ramps, even the pedestrian signals, pedestrian activated signals, the pedestrian activated crosswalks, things of that nature. In low to moderate income areas, we receive federal funding that can be utilized in these neighborhoods throughout the community. And so it's a great program. Sometimes people are concerned with utilizing federal funds like that. The thing you need to remember is that if we don't utilize our allotment in our community, somebody else will utilize that funding somewhere else. So we really should take advantage of those opportunities in our community and improve and enhance our community. So that's one component of the housing and grant programs that we administer. The other is through what's called the home program, and these are more for individual homeowners, for again low to moderate income families, where down payment assistance can be provided for first-time home buyers, and also funding available to do